Hi everybody, back again. Okay, so this time I'm going to show you how to configure your Naze32 using Cleanflight. Probably most of you guys have already got this part running, so feel free to skip ahead, but I'm going to put this part in just for any beginners. If you want to find out about Cleanflight, just go to cleanflight.com. I'll put the links in the video description. The cool thing about Cleanflight is that it actually runs as a Google Chrome extension. So all you have to do is just search the Chrome web store for Cleanflight and you'll find it here, and then just install it as a part of Google Chrome, which is very cool. Now, before you run Cleanflight, you need to make sure that your serial port for the Naze32 is configured on the USB. What you need to do with versions of Windows 7 and stuff like that, you'll need to manually install the driver. I will also put this link here for the correct driver in the video description. The way that you can check that your Naze32 is communicating properly is when you plug it in, you should see a COM port appear, and I can see here that I've got the USB to UART bridge on COM3. Now I can confirm that that is actually the Naze32 and not something else by just unplugging it and plugging it back in. But yep, I know that all of this is working at the moment. So the next thing to do is to actually launch Cleanflight. Now, if this is the first time that you've launched Cleanflight and you haven't used it before, you haven't set up your Naze32 with Cleanflight before you connect, you need to go to the firmware flasher, and you'll see here it says choose a firmware board. Cleanflight's compatible with quite a few different hardware boards, but what we're interested in here is the latest stable version of the Naze board. So at the moment that's v1.8.1. So if you just select that, select the full chip erase if this is the first time that you're running Cleanflight, and then we click load firmware from online. Now this isn't actually going to flash the firmware, this is just going to download the one that you've selected. So let's click that, wait a second, and here we go, it's confirming, yep, target Naze, the version that we asked for. We've got change logs and bug fixes, and then all you need to do is go ahead and flash your firmware. Now be aware that if you've got the full chip erase, obviously you're going to lose any settings on the Naze. So if this is the first time that you're doing it, if you're doing it on a new board, that's not really an issue because it hasn't been set up yet anyway. If you've had your flight controller talking to Cleanflight previously, then I suggest that you go into Cleanflight before you update the firmware and do a backup of your settings, which you can restore after you've done the firmware update. So let's assume that you've got all your firmware updated. We want to go ahead and connect. It's pretty much instantaneous. I've had a couple of weird times where it hasn't been instantaneous, and I found even switching between some of the tabs has been like delayed and buggy, and I've had like strange results when it's behaving like that, and it's better off to just reboot your computer and generally everything comes good again. It's only happened a couple of times, but it has happened, and not just on this computer. So the first thing that we need to do is go to the ports tab. And again, this isn't really clearly documented in a lot of places where people are telling you how to set up telemetry, but you need to go to UART1 and make sure that telemetry is set to FrSky. If this isn't done, you're going to get nothing, because basically from what I can gather, FrSky has its own little serial protocol for the telemetry, and they will give out the information for that. You have to sign an NDA, whatever. So I'm assuming the authors of Cleanflight have signed the NDA and have basically been able to program in the correct protocol to talk to the FrSky. So anyway, when you select this, it means that we're talking in the right language, so to speak. So once you've changed that, hit save and reboot. Then the next thing that we have to do is go to the configuration tab. You'll see in some of the older tutorials that they're telling you to go into the CLI, the command line interface, and punch in all these commands. But now with the newer version of Cleanflight, you actually, for the common tasks, you don't need to do that. They've put checkboxes and they've basically made it a lot more user-friendly. We need to, actually you can disable this RSSI because it's, like I said in the last video, the Naze's got nothing to do with that in this particular setup. If you have a GPS board, you can enable it and make sure that you've got the correct setting. The U-blocks I think is one of the more popular ones. If you enable that, then it will, I believe, be passed through on the telemetry. The next thing we need to do is make sure that the battery voltage is enabled. If it's not enabled, of course, you are not going to get your battery voltage on the telemetry. Now, the cell voltage here, I mean, I'm not really sure about because actually we don't have the correct cable to be able to monitor individual cell voltage. We only have the main power rail from the battery connected to the voltage sense input on the Naze32. So all it can possibly know is the total voltage of your LiPo pack. There's no way that it can know what the individual cell voltage is. So I guess this is just a way of it guessing, but it's fairly useless if it's a guess. So yeah, I'm not really sure what the deal with that is. If anyone can fill me in, leave it in the comments below. Now the last thing that we need to make sure is checked is obviously the telemetry, because without this checked, then the telemetry feature will not be enabled and you will not get anything sent back to your Taranis. So once you have all that set, click save and reboot. Now we will need to come back to the modes tab and set up the different modes with your aux channels, but it's much easier to do that once we have our script installed and the Taranis is fully set up. Then you come back into Cleanflight and set up your switches, which is really not very difficult to do. There's one last thing that you need to do, and you need to go into the command line interface. And I mentioned that the FrSky telemetry is like it's their own proprietary protocol, and it's an inverted bus. And what this means is that low is high and high is low. And this doesn't mean, you know, when your battery's full, it's going to say 0, and when it's empty, it's going to say 13 volts. What it means is that with the digital communication, a pulse is a 0 and no pulse is a 1. So you don't really need to understand what that is, but you do need to set up. So you need to type in set telemetry underscore inversion equals 1. And you can see telemetry inversion set to 1. Now the other thing is you have to type save. If you just exit the CLI and don't type save, you actually lose any changes. It even says that up here. So now we have everything in Cleanflight set up, and we can move on to installing the script.